Appreciate Charmin and the Mandolin Orchestra being with us this morning. Thank you for sharing your gifts with us once again. Yesterday, I was in the city and accidentally found myself in Midtown, quite close to Fifth Avenue, and suddenly realized I was not going to be able to cross Fifth Avenue when I wanted to. And so we watched some of the parade. I don't know how many bagpipers you all know. There are a lot of bagpipers who live in this part of the world. Many, many more than I had first realized. So on this St. Patrick's Day, I honor Rose Gallagher, born in Magara-Losk, Donegal in 1922. She didn't speak a word of English until she was sent off to school. Her parents moved from Donegal to Glasgow, leaving her with her grandparents when she was just a toddler. Her grandfather was a hard-working farmer, and as such, Rose had to join in with all the work. She milked the cows in the morning, she walked home for lunch, back to school, back home, milked the cows again, and often did much of that barefoot. At the age of 11, her grandfather died while out at sea gathering seaweed, which would become fertilizer. Her grandfather, Patrick, was 70. He'd been out on the sea many times, but he could not swim. He was out with 3 other men. 2 survived, and 1 didn't. Rose was on the beach when her grandfather's body came to shore. For a year, she and her grandmother did the best that they could at the farm by themselves, but her grandmother died the following year. And so at the age of 12, Rose moved to Glasgow to live with her parents for essentially the first time in her memory. Rose hated Glasgow for many reasons, but one of them, perhaps the main reason, is because it's very clear that she and her mother did not get along with each other at all. Just before her 18th birthday, Rose's mother came at her, quote, with a broom handle. Rose walked out of the house, and she did what anybody who would do, who was an Irish Catholic, who wanted to turn the screws on her Irish Catholic mother. This was revenge. She joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force of the British Armed Forces, the Women's RAF. This was in 1940. She would go on to serve in Portsmouth, London, Sealand, working on radar installations. She did not return to Glasgow until her father's death in 1945. That same year, she turned the screws to her mother even harder. She married my granddad. My English, Protestant, crazy in all the positive ways someone can be crazy grandfather. They eloped. Rose, grandma, she was something of a disciplinarian with her own children, but they adored her unfailingly, and for us as grandkids, oh my gosh, she was the kind of grandma that showed up at your sibling's birthday party with a gift wrapped and surreptitiously slid it under the table to you because she didn't want you to feel left out. She was the best cook. She was a safe person to talk to. You could tell her anything. She was the best embodiment of a matriarch, the kindly grandmother, family first, relationships first, and you always knew you had an ear. So when Jesus says, "How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings," I am now reminded of how safe it is to have a mother hen who wants to gather her brood. I'm reminded of that safety in part because I know that my grandmother had not felt safe herself. How comfortable it was to be around her because she clearly believed that whatever had happened to her was not going to happen to her kids or grandkids. She had no time for nationalism. Someone who had straddled the Irish-British divide, the Protestant-Catholic divide, with parents and without them divide, and reasoned that she was better off without them, so she was sure as heck going to parent in a very particular way, and therefore was the epitome of kindness and patience. It was she who, in front of her grandchildren, never had a bad day, never had a bad word to say out about anybody, never even showed any moodiness at all. Her suffering, that of the mother hen, was ultimately and unknowingly at the time for the benefit of the chicks. When Rose died in 2000, it was devastating for the family. It was tough because you knew it, you felt it, you absorbed it. The mother hen for the clan was gone. And also, hey, we'd had one. We know what it's like to have a mother hen and gather under her wings. Thanks be to God that we'd had one. Don't we all need one, want one? Jesus says that he wants to be a mother hen for the residents of Jerusalem, even as he acknowledges that in doing so there is great danger for him. He wants to gather all the chicks under his wing. These verses are exactly the kind of verses that can give us fits. They don't seem to flow well. That's the first thing. Some scholars believe that you have two sets of sayings that Luke has tried to stitch together into one narrative and nearly almost sort of pulls it off. They're not particularly accessible verses because we aren't clear of the Pharisees' motivations. We may not know much about Herod. If we don't know if Jesus actually thinks that they'll go back to Herod with this message and let Herod know that he called him a fox. And we're likely unclear as to why Jerusalem is spoken of in exactly this manner. Indeed, you and I are immediately confronted by the difficult question of why Jerusalem features so prominently in the biblical text and its seemingly outsized place in world religion. For us, there is a tendency, I think, to shy away from these verses if we're intellectually honest with ourselves, because for most of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, we already know that there is so much that we don't know about Jerusalem and its history, significance, and status. It's actually Socrates doing the talking for us here. How did Socrates know he was the smartest philosopher? Because he knew how little he knew in contrast to the philosophers who proclaimed that they were the smartest, because they knew so much. When it comes to Jerusalem, I'd argue that some folks here, I would hope, are smart like Socrates. We know there is so much that we don't know. And if we choose to admit that it's a moral good, that we don't know it all, we also know that that can be swallowed up by those who purport to understand everything, not just about the Bible, but also the history, the politics, the significance, and the status of the city of Jerusalem. We saw that when the United States moved its embassy to Jerusalem and proclaimed it was a moral good with a high degree of certitude by some Christian American church leaders and politicians. How can you be so sure? Undoubtedly, some of you, because you are well read, I know many of you read the New York Times, you will have seen a piece about Jonathan Cahn over in Wayne, who leads the Beth Israel congregation, which is a non-denominational Christian church, whose house of worship is called the Jerusalem Center. Cahn has become famous for stitching together biblical verses and claiming that they speak prophecy from modern times and that our current president is ushering in the reign of Christ. And what's so frustrating about this, other than the toxic theology, of course, is the confidence, the certainty with which an American Christian speaks to a suburban congregation in New Jersey about the way in which the texts are all stitched together just for us and for our understanding. To speak about Jerusalem and Israel and Palestine and all of Jerusalem's people, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Baha'i, Druze, Samaritan, and more, that all of these things happen for the good, for the benefit of us. And so I come to this conversation from a place of humility. I don't know how to fix anything. I don't know how to fix myself most days. Never mind fixing Jerusalem. Even as I think we recognize how this text can actually get lived out. Jesus says that those who might bring peace to Jerusalem, the mother hens who gather the chicks in their many different forms, are ultimately swallowed up by the fox. Jesus goes on his way, and while Herod seems interested, later in the text, Herod seems interested, perhaps even mildly entertained or bemused by Jesus and his message, he does nothing to stop the impending crucifixion. And when we look to modern times, this is how the text is lived out. We see the pattern again and again and again. I don't know the moral virtues of many political leaders who have sought to broker peace among peoples, but Anwar Sadat brokered an Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty and he was killed for it. Yitzhak Rabin and a rally for peace now, which favored a two-state solution and opposed settlement expansion, was killed for advocating for what many of us would argue seemed like the right things. Dignity for all, peace now. And so this is what makes this set of verses even more maddening. We don't know much about Jerusalem. We struggle to understand Jesus' context, and we also say the way in which these verses were and are lived out. When the mother hen seeks to gather her chicks, and those chicks are small or tall, white or brown, brave and bold or meek and mild, when someone tries to welcome, shepherd, guide, heal, and help all of the chicks, the fox keeps getting under the fence. Jesus, Sadat, Rabin, and dozens of unnamed, hundreds of unnamed, is it thousands of unnamed prophets and peacemakers? Thousands of other hens, and always the fox lurks. And we know this, of course, we know this. And so why do we not teach our children to build walls? Or build fences strong enough, or electrified enough? Why do we not teach our children to find a plot of land and live on a commune far, far away from the fox? Why not roll up the carpet, head for the Yukon, or better yet, if you have the means, go to Switzerland? Why would we teach our children that to be peacemakers is actually the best course of action, that it is a great virtue? Why would we say that if we are raising our children a particular way, we should look to Jesus, emulate the ethics of this man, emulate the hospitality of this man, see the vision of this man who preaches and teaches healing and goodness and justice and proclaims right from the off that peacemakers are blessed, and will ride into Jerusalem later in the text on a donkey, even as the Romans come into town from the opposite direction on war horses and chariots? Why do we continue to signal to our children that, in fact, they should not go to the Yukon or Switzerland, build walls, or electrify their fences, if at all possible? Years ago, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, walking along the Lion's Rump, a well-worn trail, hiking trail there, when we came upon a kramat, a Muslim house of prayer along the trail. We were just passing by when a man who was going in to pray asked us if we would like to come in. "You're welcome to come in and pray with me. I'll show you how," he said. And I thought, how lovely, how uplifting it is to be welcomed like that by a stranger. From the little that I know, a man at the door of the Al-Noor Mosque in Christchurch greeted his attacker by saying hello, welcoming him, calling out to him, "Hello, brother." The fox was at the door, and the man didn't ask questions, didn't seek to stop him, just called him his brother. I am shocked that I'm not shocked by what happened in Christchurch, as I was not shocked when a synagogue was attacked in Pittsburgh. Anti-Semitism, anti-immigrant sentiments, anti-Muslim hatred is seemingly all interwoven. And it too teaches us about the ethics of walls and fences and disappearing to the Yukon or wherever. Peace seems so flimsy, and the chicks seem so likely to suffer, sometimes because of the fox. The man at the door called out to welcome his brother, and we who are Christians must be reminded that this is indeed an illumination of our own scriptures this morning. That man sought to be a mother hen to a stranger, for Al-Noor to be a place where all the chicks gathered for safety and warmth and prayer. On May 1st, we will host Yom HaShoah services here at Union Congregational Church with the blessing of our local rabbis, and we will worship and remember with Jews and Muslims. We're setting up an iftar dinner with the Peace Islands Institute to be held during Ramadan. Please come. Please come, not just because it's a nice thing to do, but because gathering with Jews and Muslims for Yom HaShoah and iftar dinner during Ramadan is a way of viewing life. Because we are continually confronted by important choices, and Jesus brings this out. He illuminates this understanding. Being open doesn't keep you safe. Being loving doesn't automatically grant you security. Being hospitable won't solve all of the world's problems. The fox does indeed lurk. And like Grandma, like the man at the door, like Jesus, we come to understand that we have to grapple with hope every day. We aren't promised anything except for a more true meaning of life when we do that. That in giving away, we receive. In dying to our egos, we really live. In refuting the fox, we envision God's kingdom, where the Muslim, the Christian, the Jew, the Samaritan, the Druze, the atheist, the agnostic can call out to each other, "Welcome, brother, come on in." Then we start to live. May you be blessed by the paths of peace. May you be blessed by gathering under the wings of the hen. May you be blessed by the call for you yourself to be a hen for all of God's chicks. May you be blessed. May you be blessed. Amen.